That leaves us with philosophy. The philosophical question is, they're human, does that matter? Because that's where almost every sophisticated pro-choice arguer is arguing. It's not that they're not human. That's what you're going to see on Facebook. That's what you're going to see on Twitter. That's what you're going to hear if you have a conversation with somebody on the street that doesn't know what they're talking about. But if you're talking about to a pro-choice academic, they're not going to argue it's not human. They're going to argue that it's not a person. What they're going to say is, we can draw a line through the human family. We got a lifetime that you live, from the moment you come into existence to the time you die. And this line is universally applied to all human organisms you fall into. We'll draw a line through that existence, that continuum of life. And everybody on this side of the line is lacking certain capacities. So they're merely human, but they're not persons. And then everybody on this side of the line, they're like me in morally important ways, and so I have to limit what I can do to them. These are all persons. Everybody over here belongs in the family of persons. Mere humans, I have no basic moral duties or obligations to them at all. Persons, I have to treat like I would treat everybody else because they're like me. That's the line that's being drawn. Okay, so here's what we call a diagnostic question that I use. And I do it when I'm in front of large audiences. Actually, I demonstrate it every time. This is a small audience, so it would be weird for me to do it to any one of you, so I'm not going to do that. But what I do is I'm on campus talking to people, and I'm trying to figure out where this person and I agree. Because I know where we disagree, right? Abortion, he thinks it's right, I think it's wrong. We got that, right? But why? Where is it? And once I've made my case about science, I ask another question. I said, can I ask you a question? And they always say, would it be objectively wrong for you to kill me right now, or for me to kill you right now? Would that be objectively wrong for us to treat each other like that? Almost every single person you ask that question to will say yes. You'll get your odd, college sophomore moral nihilist that's going through a Nietzsche phase, but they're not normal. I mean, most people still think it's wrong to kill another human being. And if you get somebody, by the way, that says, no, there's nothing objectively wrong about us killing each other, stop talking about abortion, because they don't think it's wrong to kill anybody for any reason. And so now you got to jump back and have a different conversation altogether. Does it make sense to believe that there are really no moral wrongs that are objective? Does it really make sense to say that genocide was just a choice or preference by the Nazis against the Jews, or that it was wrong not to have happened? Does it really make sense to say that rape is just a choice that people make, as morally legitimate as anybody else's, and it's not wrong for all people at all times everywhere? Or does it make more sense to say, look, rape is obviously wrong, and that's clear to all morally functioning individuals? But we got to get away from abortion because they just don't think anything's wrong. They've got a whole magazine rack of issues, and we got to deal with that separately. But most people say yes. Almost everybody says yes. So here's the next question I ask. Once I get the first one, once I get the yes, the next question is this. What changed? What changed from the embryo or fetus that you once were to the more mature person standing in front of me, the more mature human being standing in front of me, that if I killed you then, under the arguments you're offering me, there's nothing that I could do wrong to you? As I read a pro-choice philosopher or author, Chris Capozzi, recently said in one of his books, the unborn are not the kind of human being that can be wronged by their very nature. So what changed where you were the kind of thing that it was okay to do all of that to? And here's the important thing that you need to understand as you're having these conversations. Whatever answer they give, this is the moral weight it has to carry. At this point, you can do whatever you want to them. And then take whatever they say and add it to that life, and suddenly if I did the exact same thing to them, it would be the worst thing I could ever do to another human being. That is the moral, the philosophical explanation that they have to offer. Whatever their answer is, it has to have that much weight, that much authority, that much of an ability to explain. If I tore you to limbs into pieces here and vacuumed through a tube, that was fine. If I did the same thing to you here, it is the worst thing I could ever do to another human being. I've joined the ranks of moral monsters. What possibly accounts for that change? And this is where we use what we call the SLED acronym. It's developed by a philosopher by the name of Stephen Schwartz and popularized by Greg Kokel and Scott Klusendorf. SLED is size. This is level of development, which will get us to ability to feel pain. Environment and degree of dependency. Every answer that they give you, by necessity, will fall into one of those four. Size, level of development, environment, or degree of dependency. And what we counter argue back is that none of those things can possibly explain why I could kill you then but not now. None of those do the philosophical work necessary to differentiate between human beings we're allowed to kill and human beings that we're not. Because all of them suffer from either what we call degree problems or episodic problems, which means that size, let's start there. You don't meet that many people that say that anymore. That was an old thing when they would say, well, you were very small back then. Size is not a value-giving property. You don't look at big people and think, oh, look how big that guy is. It'd be really wrong to kill him. And hopefully you don't look at small people and think, oh, that's so sad. Look how small they are. Their poor bodies just can't hold value. Because we understand size is a degreed property. It's degreed among the human family, and it's degreed in the course of your lifetime. You were smaller, you were now bigger. We will all change sizes even during the course of the day. You were never taller during the rest of the day, and then when you first wake up in the morning, you're shorter when you go to bed at night because your spine compressions. All of that is true, and you could have been lighter when you woke up and heavier than the day, depending on how much you ate during the day, or lighter when you go to bed because you worked out. Size is degreed, and it changes all the time. So what we're looking for grounding, though, is some explanation of our common intuition of universal human value and universal human dignity. And by that, I mean, we look at things going on in other cultures, other parts of the world, under other systems of government. No matter where they are, no matter what's going on, there's things that we perceive as wrong, right? For example, right now, Yemen is on the verge of starvation at a level that the world has not seen in a long time. We're talking about millions of people on the brink of starvation. And if you see the pictures, it is horrifying what's going on in that, is as people have become the victims of civil war and strife and governmental strife from the area around them. So when you see those pictures, as awful as they are, your immediate response should be, that's wrong. Other human beings should never have to endure that. Other human beings shouldn't ever go through that. Something should be done to help them. But in order for that intuition to make sense, then there has to be something about you and women and children and men who live in Yemen that is the same. And not just the same, but is equally shared by both of you. If it's equally wrong for them to go through it as would be for you or anybody that you know, we're appealing to this idea of universal human value, universal human dignity. We're saying that there's something about them that's like us. And that's the same everywhere, in all places, at all times. And so when we're grounding value, we're looking for something that we have equally, that we share equally. And size just isn't it. So let's get to the level of development, because when we're talking about something that we hold intrinsically that all human beings equally share. We're arguing that what the best explanation of that universal human dignity, that universal human value is that it's grounded in the only thing that all human beings equally share, which is our shared humanity. It's the only thing that can ground something that we all have the same of. Level of development is what you're going to hear more than anything else when you're talking about the ability to feel pain, those kind of arguments. There's different levels that they all give. Some of them will say heartbeat. Some of them will say not just the presence of twitching heart muscle, but actually a heartbeat. Some of them will say ability to feel pain. Dawkins said that if you could demonstrate that the unborn child felt pain during abortion, he would be against abortion in principle because that would demonstrate that there was a life worth preserving within there. Some of them will say organized cortical brain activity. That's what David Boonin says, at the point where the brain becomes the locus of the organism's control and organizational process. Hillary Clinton and Cecile Richards would have said birth when they're born, that they are, and did say that very publicly, and they're not a person until they're born. Prior to birth, they're not people. Peter Singer, who I mentioned earlier, and I quoted from him, would say much long after birth, because he would say conscious awareness is what makes you valued. The ability to know that you exist means that you have something that I can take from you that matters to you. Prior to that being there, there's nothing from you that I can take from you. You're not the kind of being that I can wrong. Now here's two questions that we would ask to anybody when they offer us a level of development argument. All level of development arguments, by the way, are subject to the problem of degrees and episodes. All of these level of developments that we're talking about come in degrees, as opposed to when you come into existence, there's a human organism there after fertilization. We know that. Boom, human organism. We have one right there. All the rest of these is difficult to understand when they come into existence immediately. They come in degrees and they go. When you're talking about conscious awareness, it goes, man. I mean, sometimes I see it go in the middle of my talks. I mean, people just go. It comes and it goes. Your level of conscious awareness. And I was talking to a young guy up in Connecticut recently, and I was asking him questions about who he's allowed to kill. And I said, and he was saying, well, conscious awareness, that you're aware, you're awake, you understand that you exist, and when you go to sleep, it's like, well, no, not when you're sleeping. And I said, well, you're not consciously aware. And the philosophers that argue against this say, yeah, but you have what we consider to be a value or conscious awareness that as soon as, well, like a current conscious awareness, if I wake you up, you're immediately going to go right back into being consciously aware that you exist. And so we're going to give you a pass that you're asleep. And so I said, what about reversible comas? And they said, oh, no, we can't kill people in reversible coma. I said, well, why can't we kill them in reversible coma? Well, because eventually they're going to come back and they'll have conscious awareness again. I said, well, how long? I mean, what about like 9 months? You know, if it's a 9-month coma and then you know they're going to wake up, should we be allowed to kill them in that time? They don't have conscious awareness and it's coming. He said, well, no, I don't think we should be allowed to. I said, why? When we extend this particular, because we know conscious awareness is coming. I said, okay, then why would we not extend the exact same thing to the unborn? Because we know conscious awareness is coming if you don't kill them. So again, I'm not actually taking it away from them. And this gets very detailed in several different books by philosophers. They go back and forth. But at the end of the day, the episodic problem. But here are 2 questions that we can ask ourselves without having to get deeply embedded in the philosophy. Number 1, who gave them the authority to draw lines through the human family and say that this particular capacity, this particular ability is what makes you the kind of thing I have to respect? Who empowered them to make that decision on behalf of all of humanity? Who issued that to them? Because as far as I know, no one's been given the authority to divide up human family and say these people matter, these people don't, outside of God. And if you're not a theist, then you got a bigger problem unless you just think there's nothing wrong with doing it to anybody. The next question you ask is, why should I ever believe you got it right? Because it's important to remember their argument is not that there's nothing morally wrong that you can do to another human being. What they're saying is that this is not the kind of being that can be wrong. But if they're wrong, and I follow their advice, they've invited me into great moral condemnation. I become a killer of other human beings. How should I ever believe that they have accurately picked the right capacity? Why can I ever have confidence that you just didn't make me into an unjust killer of innocent human life? Who gave them the authority, and how can I ever believe that they got this right? Those are questions we always have to ask when somebody points to a level of development argument. So let's get to environment. And by the way, the ability to feel pain, and if you have questions about that later, we'll hit that now. But all of those level of development arguments, they're gonna have problems of episodes, they're gonna have problems of degrees. Environment. Now, Peter Singer, who I mentioned earlier, he argues that we should be free to kill newborns. And he, by the way, is a very influential philosopher. And he's not the only one. There's all sorts of philosophers out there. I can think of 5 off the top of my head that argue at high levels of Journal of Medical Ethics that we should be free to kill newborns. That means if you take your child home and you find out that, and this is, by the way, it's not just health problems. It's not just if you went home and some sort of genetic abnormality showed itself, expressed itself that wasn't there before. They don't restrict it to that. They're going to say, let's say your financial situation changed. Let's say you took your child home and within like a week or 2, you lose your job and that's no longer a financially viable child that you have. Take the child back to the hospital and have it painlessly and mercifully killed. Because you should be free to move on and have another child when the circumstances are better for you. Now, Peter Singer, when people react to this strongly, as many people still do, he says, there's nothing wrong about this. As a matter of fact, this argument is consistent. He said, let me tell you why. Because you're allowed to kill them inside the womb. You're allowed to kill them when they're right there. And he said, all that is where they are. And where you are does not determine what you are. And he said, there's nothing magical about an 8-inch trip down the birth canal that transformed them to the kind of thing we're allowed to kill to the kind of thing that we can respect. If we're okay with killing them here, then we should be okay with killing them here. Because all that has changed is where they are, and that location is not a value-giving property. He's right. He is monstrously and grossly wrong about that we should be free to kill newborns. But his argument as to why, he is correct. His position is consistent with the beliefs that we see most often argued by the other side on this issue. Where they are is not what they are. And since most people are still morally sensitive enough to know that we should not kill newborns, then we should not kill them before they're born either. Yes, sir?
You're probably there. Does that shift it back to level of development and after that? What's a newborn?
Sure, I mean, if you were to say that newborns, but Peter Singer doesn't say newborns have value anyway. He's all level of development. He's all saying, not until conscious awareness comes do you have any value whatsoever.
It's degree of dependence.
Yeah, all of it, these, depending on who you're arguing with, they'll slip all up and down the sled. You have to be clear on where they are and what's going on. And the central part of that argument is that none of these do the work necessary to explain why it could do that to you then, but not now, because that's what it has to explain, a complete and total change of moral value. If we accept that they're human from the moment they come into existence, then the next question is, what makes them the kind of category of human life that I'm allowed to kill? And whatever answer they give will be in here, and it's just not going to do it. Now, environment, there's a different kind of environment argument. This is the bodily autonomy argument that grants everything that I'm saying about the value of the human being. We'll table that for a minute, because that's a more sophisticated argument you'll hear from philosophy professors. You won't really hear it much on Twitter or things like that. Or in common conversation. This environment is all where you are. If they say, like Hillary, should we kill them before they're born because they're just not a person. That's key. She didn't say they're persons, but there's competing rights. She said they're not persons till they're born. So you have to explain, what is it that makes you not a person? By the way, the whole distinction, what gives you the authority to make a distinction that there's humans and persons, and then we're allowed to kill humans but not persons. So that's a pure argument of they're there, so they're not of value. Level of development would be they have to attain something. Even under a level of development argument, environment is not an issue. Level of development will have to be thing. Now, it could be, I guess, if you want to argue viability, you've reached the ability to survive outside of your mother, which is, by the way, what Planned Parenthood versus Casey says, the 1992 court case that strengthened the Roe arguments. They say it's no longer trimesters, it's viability. The problem with picking viability is that viability is not a standard that is determined by the life itself. Viability is determined by our ability to act medically and scientifically on that life to preserve it at different premature stages of its life, which means that your value as a human being is entirely dependent on where you live and the medical ability that can be gotten to continue to live. And in Atlanta, you're doing great, man. You got Northside Hospital right here. Northside Hospital is like the best neonatal group in the country, one of the best in the world. If you're in a third world country, man, you're not going to be viable until after your first birthday, because infant mortality rates are so high there that if you say the majority of them are going to die by that point, they're just not viable. They're not going to live. All of your value is tied up into what a culture around you can do for you, and that's not the kind of value we're talking about. So that's why viability is a garbage marker. It just doesn't explain anything about the life in question. All it does is explain something about what we're capable of doing to that life. And so finally, degree of dependence. Question? Yes, go ahead.
I do think that one of her interviews, she did finally say, oh, it is a child or a person, I can't remember which, but she said it just doesn't have rights. I remember it shook the world.
Okay, but here's the problem, and again,
I totally agree, but I think...
Her problem with that answer is that she doesn't even know what she's arguing anymore.
She's more like Singer.
Yeah. And that's what, there was a young lady in Chicago last weekend that stood up, and she gave me this long question about this, I had to be told 5 times how intelligent the guy that asked the question was. And she's a lovely young lady, by the way, and I love talking to her. But one of the things that came up when she brought up those questions was, your friend is very confused if he's actually arguing the things as you're relaying them to me. If Hillary Clinton's response is they don't have rights, then she's not accurately conveying any pro-choice argument.
Right.
Not this, and not bodily autonomy rights. Because bodily autonomy rights will grant that it have rights, but they'll say they're competing rights against the mother's right to choose what to do with her body. And in those competing rights, the mother wins over the child. But nobody would say they don't have rights unless they're saying it's not a person. So in that particular case, what Hillary's doing is arguing nothing in particular.
Right. She made it into Pro-Life News when she did that. I had to look it up myself.
More likely than not, though, she felt a lot of heat for something she said earlier, and so she went back and tried to... because, her husband was the one that said that it should be safe, legal, and rare, which under their arguments doesn't make any sense whatsoever. If they're not human beings, what do you care if they happen all the time? Let them happen 3 million times a year. If they don't have any value, what does it matter? Why do you want it to be rare? The only way we want it rare is if they matter. If they matter, rare isn't good enough. We need it not happening.
Right. She was even against the Baby Born Alive Act. So, if it survived...
Yeah, but and there was no enforcement there, though.
Right.
I mean, it was easy to be Oh, yeah, she was against it, yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that was, one of the things that, by the way, animated me into all of this was when I heard
survival story.
The afterbirth abortion, not the afterbirth abortion arguments, the partial birth abortion arguments, when I was not yet in any way public in anything that I believed, I had to hear people that wouldn't give an inch all day coming to the congressional floor because they were saying, look, we may think that this is bad, but we can't give an inch, because we give an inch, we say that there's something valuable about the human life and there's something we can't do. So in order for them to maintain the hold that they had on the law of the United States, they felt like they had to defend what should have been clearly indefensible to any morally functioning human being. It's like, if that's what you got to do, then I got to do what I got to do, which is join the argument against you. So she did, but she didn't do it because she believes anything. She did it because she was trying to get herself a politically expedient thing. Because what she said bothered other people. Okay, degree of dependence. It just says that they have some massive level of dependence. And one of the things I point out is level of dependence. Notice that he says degree of dependence. He doesn't say dependence itself. So degree of dependence is the thing that makes it bad. Thank you so much for coming. My daughter's, I mentioned, type 1 diabetic. She, from the age of 8 years old, is medically dependent on insulin, and she has other dependencies. For example, because she's an athlete and she trains hard, she runs the risk every night when she goes to sleep of dropping lows. Lows kills type 1 diabetics, not highs. Highs do long-term damage. They can cause blindness over the years if you don't control yourself. They can cause problems with the extremities. But lows are what's killed them. That's what kills them fast. And so every night when my daughter goes to sleep, she knows that she's susceptible to lows because of her high level of activity during the day. So, it's not fun to have at the time she was 10, I remember when she looked at me and she said, what do you think it would feel like to not go to bed every night and worry that you're not going to wake up the next morning? She said, what would it be like for other kids? And there's a reason why she has to be afraid, because it happens. It happens all the time. We have continuous glucose monitors on her. The alarms go off. We have to wake her up, make her drink juice, so that she lives through the night, because we've got to get her blood glucose back up to a place that won't put her in a seizure and that will cone her brain and kill her. And so this is a reality for her. She can't sleep through the night. As brilliant as she is, as beautiful as she is, as athletic as she is, she can't sleep through the night without help. She is dependent on her family. So, it would be a lesser offense to kill my daughter because of an increased level of dependence. I haven't met anybody around the country who has the guts to tell me yes to that. So everybody acknowledges that her increased level of dependency hasn't made her less valuable. The question is, in this particular case, why then does their level of dependency make them less valuable as human beings? We take a standard that we don't hold any other human beings to, and we apply it to them. They have a level of dependency. And for Christians, which a lot of Christians support abortion, this is where it gets really dicey, because I think the Bible, if you look like James chapter 1, verse 27, where it talks about our commitment to helping widows and orphans, it gives a very clear message throughout that the Christian responsibility or duty to those who can't help themselves actually grows obligation. It doesn't shrink it. We're not allowed to say that's not a life that I would want to live and therefore leave them to their own. We are commanded that when we see people in need, we are to step up and to give more to those people, and that's exactly what God wants from us. So degree of dependence for the Christian is the exact opposite. But even as we evaluate value, nobody is going to say that gives. So there in a nutshell,